actor Chin Han from The Dark Knight and Mortal Kombat today. This is Exploring Humanity through Sci-Fi. This continues my mission to get a better understanding of ourselves through sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and comics as our mode of exploration. This Singaporean actor gathered attention for his role as Lau in The Dark Knight. His TV appearances include Fringe, Arrow, and The Blacklist. And he starred in the first Mortal Kombat as Shang Tsung.
You know, it's great. I've seen the movie, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. How do you approach a guy like that? And you're actually the second Shang Tsung I've talked to, because I talked to, Kiri Tagawa a few years ago, and he was the original Shang Tsung in the movies. So how do you approach him?
I spoke to Carrie a couple of years back as well, I think.
No kidding.
I believe it was at an Oscar party, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously, I had no clue that I was going to be doing this a few years down the road. Otherwise, we would have a nice tete-a-tete or, conversation about this. I am a big fan of the movie from '95, and obviously love the, Carrie's, monumental performance. It's so iconic and so memorable. So the way to start on this project is you pretty much have to just suck it up, and gather as much gumption as you possibly can. And obviously with the help of Simon McCoy and Greg Rousseau, we crafted a character that was, of course, reminiscent of all the iterations of Shang Tsung. It's not just Carrie's, because over the last, almost 30 years, of Mortal Kombat lore, you have had various people doing it and voicing it and playing it. And so we wanted to find something that captured the spirit of it, but still had something new to offer, the new gamers, the new generation of gamers, and honor those, gamers who have been with us for all these years. And then at the end of the day, really, you just pretty much have to get on with it and hope, that some of it sticks and lands with the fans.
No, it did. It did. I'm one of the older gamers. I've been playing it for many years and enjoyed it.
More with Chin Han in a moment.
And I thought the movie captured the flavor of the game very much so. And there were some lines that gamers are going to recognize that are for us. And we totally appreciated that. The scope of it seemed bigger than the other film. Everything, the sets and everything looked huge. Talk about that aspect of it and kind of playing in that huge playground you had to play with.
Well, Simon is such an interesting director. He wants to shoot everything in camera. And part of the allure of shooting everything in camera is that, you have to eschew some visual effects shots for practical effects, So with the practical effects, basically, you then have to build these sets or you have to go on location. And fortunately, we're in this part of South Australia that had all the locations. We'll take a plane ride out, and then we're in the middle of Outworld, which was Lee Creek, right? Which was so hot and forbidding and scorched and had little flames and gaseous substances shooting out from the ground. And then you come back and you go another hour out that way, and you go to Mount Crawford, where the original scenes of Hanzo Asashi and Bi-Han fighting that totally can take the place of a pine forest in Japan, for example. So it was such an interesting place to be because it afforded us all of that stuff. And then on top of that, we did build a fair amount of impressive sets as well. But I think that's why you feel the scope of it, in such a visceral way, because I feel Simon has done quite an impressive job just basically shooting things in camera.
Yeah. I think what's really impressive to me is really watching the movie. Not that I didn't think about it before, but there's so much of Asian mythology that is in this movie. And I really dug that. I thought that was really cool. And the opening sequence in Japan, obviously not really there, but oh man, it was so cool. And the martial arts and everything was just through the roof. It's just that there's so much better stunt teams now than there were in 95. Yeah, so talk about that aspect, that for us Westerners, we got a little glimpse of the Asian culture, but just enough to whet the appetite.
Yeah, well, I think this merges and marries, the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah.
What you have is the lore and, a lot of the very recognizable tropes and recognizable, even weapons, for example. Kung Lao's killer hat, has an iteration in something called the 雪笛子, which is a hat, which can be thrown and beheads people in Chinese martial arts novels. I mean, I grew up with that. I read that. So you have all of that stuff, and then you have all these actors coming in with all their amazing training, and someone like Hiroyuki Sanada, who literally is such a master at swordplay, bringing their craft to it, and then you bring that together with the kind of stunt technology, basically, with ratchets and wires and blue screen and visual effects stuff, and you kind of put it together, and you get this really otherworldly kind of feel, but with the DNA of Chinese, history or Asian martial arts history kind of woven into all of it, but it's still, ultimately a fantasy.
Absolutely. No, it's great. What a great cast too. I mean, such wonderful diversity in this movie. And it's just, man, it's nice to see that. I kind of look for that in all my movies nowadays. And it was just nice to see all these different representations and how they all mesh together. Sometimes they got along, sometimes they didn't get along, but that's the fun of it. It really was cool to see that. Yeah, comment on that aspect. And I got to give director credit for going along those lines too.
Yeah, I think the Simon and the producers and the studio. I'm glad they all bought into the idea that this will work if we had that kind of diversity. I think nothing forced, but something very natural. To this kind of genre of films. I keep thinking of movies like The Magnificent Seven. Right? Mm-hmm. I keep thinking of movies like The Guns of Navarone.
Yes.
My favorite films from that era, where a group of disparate people have to come together and overcome their differences and do that and achieve a goal. And obviously, the world has become a much bigger place. So when we say a group of disparate people, we have to mean people from different cultures and countries, and because the world is a different place from when it was 50, 60 years ago. So, it was so interesting to have that kind of difference, when we came together, it felt like an Olympic village, and it was just, it was delightful, because you have someone like Tadanobu who brings with him a certain stoicism that's so Japanese, and then you have Max coming in from Germany, even though he's Eurasian. He has a history, his parents are like in classical music, and Joe, who's a judo champion, and then, Lewis, who comes from a heritage, of stunt people, his father. It was such a communal affair. Normally when I'm, on a Hollywood film, we all pretty much come together, we do the film, we go back to our trailers, we're on our calls, we do our thing. But, I found that we were really like a family. We sat outside our trailers, we would welcome anyone into our places. We had so many meals together, we ate so much, In fact, I joke that we ate our way through Adelaide pretty much, and Sydney, but that was the experience that we had on this film.
That's good. Special effects. Now, of course, digital effects are state of the art, and certainly for Sub-Zero, it's kind of necessary, and it worked really well. But you had to deal with special effects a little bit. What was that like for you? I don't think I ever recall you dealing with that many effects. Maybe on the second Independence film, but that's about it. Independence Day film.
Yeah, well, I mean, now the movies are so interesting, right? I mean, I think the effects now are to a level in which they're almost unperceivable, imperceivable, yeah, non-perceivable.
Yeah.
For example, I keep thinking of the movie. I think it began around that time where you have Castaway, right? And a lot of the visual effects, of the waves lapping on the shores or taking away of the other islands in the background. I didn't even realize that there was so much visual effects. And I think that, I think a lot of the movies that I've done in the past few years have been like that. So Skyscraper, for example, a movie that doesn't overtly feel like it has that many effects, actually has a lot of effects, but it feels like we're in a real space and we're shooting that with real props and helicopters and things like that. But the thing about Mortal Kombat, again, I think what was exciting about Mortal Kombat was that the visual effects were there, but I think that the fighting is real.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You probably feel the bone crunching stuff, the real stuff, the wire work. Yes, it's there. But it's not. It boggles the mind for me when I see someone like Max Huang, and all his, he can jump in the air and rotate twice, before he lands. That is without wires. So, I mean, I think it's really, I think, yes, there are a lot of visual effects in this movie, but I would say that there really isn't that much I had to deal with more than the other films I've worked on.
My conversation with Chin Han continues in a moment.
I mean, you're right. The martial arts in this film are state of the art. It's amazing, the stunt work and the teams that were working and the actors, what they did. And I think Lewis is on the brink of stardom. I think he has a definite presence on camera, and I really enjoyed his work. And grounding it with his family was so important, I thought, to really, get you to connect with the character and what he was going through, to kind of find himself. And that's such a good theme. But I think he's gonna make some waves.
Yeah, I think that is, that family, with Matilda and Laura, I mean, I think they're such a tight unit, and I think the casting, did such a wonderful job. When you look at it, you can totally see the family in there. But I think one of the appeals of Mortal Kombat is definitely this aspect of it. And apart from all the fatalities and incredible catchphrases and stuff, it really ultimately is about these warriors, right, finding their arcana. And the arcana is basically their special power. Mm-hmm. And I know it's couched in this fantastical terms, but in some ways, it's a metaphor for our lives, right? I mean, we're all looking for our arcana. What is our special thing? Is it? I mean, will we be good surgeons or great accountants or the next American Idol? I mean, any version of this, I think anyone would be able to identify with. And so I think the family was very, very important, to grounding us and then allowing us to then take it to really far off places, with the rest of the film.
The costume. Something I like to ask actors is when they put on the costume and the makeup is all in place, does that really help you to find him? And it's like, oh, there he is. I'm ready to go. That kind of thing.
Yes, no, that is so integral. I think that's one of the first things, we did. And, if from the outside, it looks like a great indulgence, but the first thing they did was fly me out to Adelaide. That was before I had to shoot for a day or two. And just within that day or two, it was just purely conversation, right? It's purely conversation with Simon McCoy. It's purely conversation with Kathy Ireland, who did the costumes, and Nikki Gooley, who did the makeup. The conversations tend to go like this, right? I mean, it's like, okay, this is what I want to channel, right? I mean, I think Shang Tsung is a little reptilian, but he needs heft. So it doesn't, so he needs, kind of a combination of these two things. And then, with Nikki, it would be like, okay, so what is a person who's probably a few thousand years old? What does that do to a person's skin or skincare routine? How much was he moisturize, for example? I'm being facetious, but even with his soul-sucking abilities, that was a real conversation. I'm like, would he, with taking in all these souls and energy and all these years, would his skin be almost porous, almost thin, so that you can see his veins? And we kind of, agreed on that. And if you look carefully, you can see, his veins going that way. And so those are the conversations that we have. And then they go work their magic, right? And then a month later, we fly back into Adelaide, we get fitted. And then, you see it, you see it, right? I mean, you put it on piece by piece, because, it's so, it is so layered. And we have the incredible shoulder, the shoulder armor, the chest plate, bracelets and everything. And as you are putting it on piece by piece, and it takes a village, by the way, you start coming into the character. It's very helpful. I mean, it's all very immersive, and it helps you kind of get into character.
That's great. Well, this is actually the third time we've talked now. We talked when you were on Arrow. The time after that was for Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, nice.
And the first time we talked, you shared some great stories about, working with Heath Ledger and what that was like, and that amazing scene in Dark Knight where they're burning up the money. And actually, the funny thing was the movie was just on, and I saw Batman rescue you or kidnap you again just recently. So it's like, that scene is so amazing. But yeah, so it's always been a pleasure. Really admire your work and how you approach characters. You add your own spin. And especially with this guy, you could have easily mirrored the game a little bit, but I think you gave it your own style to it. And I thought it worked. And, hey, there's definitely room for more. So you never know.
Yeah, I mean, this is a character that is, what is interesting about characters like this, with actors, and you've spoken to so many, right? I mean, we're always looking for subtext. We're always looking for layers. We're looking for arcs. Sometimes is the trickiest thing to do is play a character where there are no clear arcs. There is no clear understanding of one's motivation. So, for example, I mean, you're talking about The Dark Knight, and so, for example, the Joker, I mean, he will tell you 3-4 different origin stories of how he got those scars. You're not clear about that. And
that's right.
And then, I think for a character like Anton Chigurh, right, for example, in No Country for Old Men, nothing. You know nothing about him. You just know that he is a force of nature. He is so incredibly singular. And those kinds of roles are very difficult to play. So in coming back to Shang Tsung, I mean, why does he do what he does? I mean, yes, he is cursed with this thing where he needs to take souls to stay young and powerful. But his appetite for it goes slightly beyond that, even, why is that? And that kind of singularity, that kind of, playing him as a force of nature, sometimes it's very difficult because the mind is a storytelling machine, right? The mind wants to put subtext and history and backstory and biodata and all that stuff onto the back of it. And I remember, having this conversation with Simon, and he, he was so, insightful about it. And he's like, I mean, let's streamline it, and it's just singular, right? And that kind of stuff sometimes is very challenging, to.
The impression I got about him was that he thinks his team, the people that fight for him, are the best, and everybody else is inferior to him. And it's like, how dare they challenge what we have? So it's arrogance, maybe, but also extreme confidence. And he thinks he's right. Everybody else is wrong. So I mean, that's how he gets through the day. There's no conscience there at all because he knows he's the best. So
Yeah.
that's the way I looked at him.
Yeah. No, you're onto something.
Yeah. So I did see that that COVID protocols in the credits were followed. How was that? Was that impact your shooting at all?
It was so interesting because when we shot in Adelaide, it was such a adventure for a lot of us. I mean, we all came from different countries. There was such a, we on our off days we would explore that part of South Australia, go to the wineries, we'd have dinners together, and then by the time we came back and did the pickups in Sydney, it was a different world that we lived in.
Yeah.
And I remember this being, this is such a interesting thing because we were all flying in from different places and we were all having to quarantine.
Yeah.
Some of us were quarantining in Brisbane, some were quarantining in Adelaide, some of us were quarantining in Sydney, but all of us were quarantining. So we were basically in our rooms for the 2 weeks leading up to the shoot. But what was lovely was, even then, we felt like we were part of a family, and we would be either Zooming each other or FaceTiming each other, just to let us know what we were having for lunch, dinner, or breakfast. And then when we finally reconnected in Sydney, I mean, the feeling, it was such a collective sigh of relief and that we were together again. But the protocols were very, they were very structured. I mean,
Yeah.
we had to do 2 to 3 tests a week. The shooting locations were kind of organized in such a way where we will basically, you have ground zero where the main cast is shooting, and then you work your way out in terms of concentric circles. And then as you're moving your way out, then there are different degrees of testing and
Wow.
compliance as you get further out. So I mean, it was very considered. I mean, it was very structured and it was very organized. So we felt safe in that environment. But it's a different world, basically.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Believe me, I know. As far as what's coming up for you, I guess COVID kind of puts, kind of pulls the brakes on all of us, but I've been busy. But do you have something that you're going to be working on or what's ahead for you?
Well, I think the thing about COVID is that I think it's slowed everybody down. I think, I think, and I think, you come to a point where you live in the present more than I think I've had in the last 13 years, right? I mean, I did in The Dark Knight in 2007, and I basically haven't stopped, and just kept going, and so this was quite a thing. I mean, it just kind of halted everything in its tracks and has allowed me to kind of be curious about other things. So I am obviously thinking as a natural progression of the creative impulse to direct next.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm looking for scripts and I'm reading things and and so I think that has been a really nice kind of a bit of a redirection for me in this time of COVID. But I have to still staying fit and ready for when you get the call. And
Sure. Oh, yeah. Hey, really appreciate your time. Mortal Kombat. This was a fun movie, but not for the kids. Definitely not.
No.
There's enough blood and the language, definitely not for kids. But for gamers, especially gamers that are older or teenagers, yeah, definitely. You're going to like it. I mean, it's the Mortal Kombat you love. So it's good.
I think it stays true to the lore. I think it stays true to the games. And, and this time and age, really, I feel it's kind of a nice cathartic experience as well if you're looking to just cut loose and let your hair down. And I'm saying that obviously, pun intended, because I do have very long hair in this movie.
Yes.
But I look forward to the audience finally getting to see it.
Yeah, I'm glad. And it's in the theaters and also on HBO Max, which is cool. And look how well King Kong did on HBO Max. So there you go. So it's not a bad option.
Mortal Kombat is streaming on HBO Max, and look for Mortal Kombat 2 in theaters this summer. On Sci-Fi Talk Plus, some exclusive episodes have a video version as well. All episodes will feature a podcast and also bonus video, great for listening and watching on your phone, tablet, or desktop. And besides that, it'll feature the best episodes selected by listener downloads. You can save 17% on a yearly plan to get those commercial-free episodes published Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, with special episodes as well. Click on the link in the show notes today. This is Tony Tolato.